When we were making The Cove, the person I really wanted to meet the most was this guy, Akira Nakamai, the head of overseas fisheries for Japan. We were trying to get interviews with him, couldn't reach him. I was going down to IWC meeting down in Chile. Plane's filled up. I can't even sit next to my own people for an 11-hour trip. They're holding the plane for one other person, and in comes Akira Nakamai, and there's one seat empty. It's right next to me. So here's the guy I most need to, the one person in the world I want to most meet, and he sits down right next to me.
I'd love to talk about the Plastic Detox. As I said, we watched it this week. It's on Netflix now. Everyone needs to watch it.
We found this researcher, Shauna Swan, and she was talking about fertility going down at this dramatic rate, 1% a year for the last 50 years. It's accelerating to 2.66%. It's a huge problem. And I thought plastics affects everything in your body, all your hormone system, but fertility is the one thing that unites us all. So we came up with this idea of doing a fertility study and doing a plastic intervention looped in with this fertility study. So we found 6 couples who had unexplained infertility, and we did a 90-day intervention. I couldn't have dreamt of a better outcome.
So we're doing this.
We're podcasting. We're podcasters now. Louie Psihoyos has spent his career doing something most people are too scared to even try, telling the truth when the world doesn't want to hear it. He's the director behind The Cove, which won an Academy Award for Best Documentary, Racing Extinction, Game Changers, and his newest film, The Plastic Detox, which dropped on Netflix this week. We actually watched it this Monday. But perhaps what I find the most interesting about Louie isn't the awards, is that he genuinely believes film is a weapon of mass construction, his words, not mine, and that the most powerful thing you can do in the world is change what people feel. Today, we're going to talk about what it means to live on purpose, to daringly stand for something uncomfortable, and yes, we're going to get into what plastics are doing to our body, our fertility, and our future. This one is personal for us at Our Ties, so welcome to the pod, Louie.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So Louie, I grew up in Wisconsin, so we have that Midwest connection. I know you're from Dubuque, Iowa.
Where in Wisconsin were you from?
About 20 minutes west of Milwaukee, Waukesha County area. I don't know if you're familiar or not.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, cool. Well, when I look at what growing up in a place like Dubuque or Waukesha is like, and then I think about some of the things that you've done things like scaling the Chrysler Building for National Geographic. You've done things like executing a covert operation in Taiji, Japan, filming in minus 20 degrees in the Alaskan permafrost, and infiltrating illegal wildlife markets in China. How do you get from Dubuque, Iowa to all of these different things?
I'd say it's probably from watching too many Jacques Cousteau specials and James Bond movies as a kid.
Yeah. That's great.
I mean, seriously, that did influence me when I was a kid watching the Jacques Cousteau specials. You can't be further away from the oceans and being in Iowa, but you see this incredible underworld going on. It's like, I want to do that. So now I run a little organization called the Oceanic Preservation Society. And, the James Bond movies were, if you look at our film Racing Extinction, it's just like a Bond film.
It totally is. Yeah, it totally is. Yeah.
We talked a bit off camera about you starting in photography, going in with an internship for National Geographic. When did that love start? I'd be curious when you got into it.
Well, I was about 6 years old. My mother would take me to the hair salon, and the only magazines they had were National Geographics. And I would sit there and thumb through them and see these, you weren't in Iowa when you're looking at a National Geographic. And I was just enthralled with that. And I wanted to be a National Geographic photographer since I read those first magazines when I was 6 years old. The only problem is that Geographic didn't hire new photographers. Back when I was a kid, you either wanted to be a photographer for National Geographic or be an astronaut. Your odds were better being an astronaut because Geographic wasn't hiring new people. But in 1980, they hired me because I won a contest called College Photographer of the Year. They gave me an internship. I proposed a story for them on garbage and recycling. It was almost a joke. I'll tell the story because I think it's kind of funny.
please.
It's
Yeah,
like
please.
Geographic would do these really optimistic stories about everything. They would do Uganda, and you wouldn't know there was a war going on there. And so there's a young designer that was laying out the magazine there. We were the young kids at the magazine. You know, he was working full time as an intern, and they would do these, stories like this couple walks across America to find the real America. So it was like, and we'd be like, think of the counter to that, like bulldozer across America. We'd make these kind of joke titles. And I remember we were watching somebody drag the garbage across the lunchroom, a big 50-gallon thing of garbage, and he says, yeah, we should do a story on garbage, like they do like on gold, silver, jade, except we'll do garbage. And he said we could do somebody like doing art from garbage. And I said, I just read about this artist that's doing art from garbage up in Northern California. And then he says something like, we could do like, an archaeologist, going through the garbage like modern garbage. And I said, I just wrote about this guy, Bill Rathje, who's a garbologist. Who does exactly that. He studies Mayan civilizations. And then this sort of collective light bulb went on at the same time. We thought, well, maybe I'll write that up and see if they bite. Yeah. And that's how I became the first photographer they hired in over a decade, is by doing the story. Then when I got that story, it's like, I was like so excited because it's just like a lifelong dream. And then I started to realize I had to make garbage look good.
Yeah.
But that became a cover story, and about, I can't remember how many inside pages, but it was the top story of the year by readership surveys.
Wow.
And they had one of the biggest responses they had for an article. And I started to realize that you could create impact. It wasn't just about, again, first principles, like why a story on garbage. Back then, there was only one mandatory recycling program in all of America, recycling program. And we were throwing things away like glass and metal. And, to me, it was unconscionable that there was throwing all the stuff away when we could recycle them. And that became part of the zeitgeist of the recycling movement. Yeah. And I realized that, there's a lot of power in media to change culture. And that was kind of one of the seeds of how I started and realized this is really a powerful tool. It's not just pretty pictures. It's how can you change a person's mind.
Yeah. We're gonna talk a lot about your other films as well, but something interesting I just heard from you is how, as a part of this project, you thought about what team you needed to bring in. The term is garbologist. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Knowing, hey, there's this artist, there's this garbologist that could help us with this. I've seen that theme throughout the rest of your films. Is you kind of bring in this, I've seen a quote as an Ocean's 11 type team to help you pull some of this together. Is that, as you're working on this National Geographic project, do you feel like that was the foundation for your playbook that you started to replicate with some of these topics? Or I'd love your thoughts there.
Yeah, well, there's the senior writer at National Geographic, Peter White. He told me, he said, listen, when you're working for National Geographic, you can get the attention of anybody in the world. And he said you can do a lot of research, but one of the keys to success that he found is you call up the top person in the world and you say that you're with National Geographic and can you spend a day with them? And almost everybody will open up the doors. And I've used that to this day. You just pick up the phone or call somebody or write somebody and say, teach me everything you know. And a lot of times there's scientists, and the scientists aren't the best at communicating, but they're the best at information. And so what I've done, what our team has done, is we basically take indecipherable science and make it understandable to the lay public.
Yeah.
And I try to become like a lay, I use this term pretty loosely, like a lay expert on a subject, and understand enough about it to communicate the ideas that these scientists are trying to get through to the public. Yeah. And that's kind of our secret sauce, is making they say a good documentary tells, but a great one shows. And I think what we can be great at moments is showing what is hard to visualize.
Yeah.
This is, I love that kind of the jigsaw puzzle of putting a film together, trying to get this, Ocean's 11 team, these group of experts together that are all kind of specialized, and get them focused on a story. And as a photographer, you're just, it's really just me and maybe an assistant creating something. But a film is like 1,000 people, many hundreds anyway.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get the best out of each one of them, because each one of them can make it or break a movie. Yeah. You want to have the best people that you can afford to bring into the equation and get them motivated. And that's what I think we're good at doing, is like, we have this really important subject, and how do we tell the story? And I don't know always going into it how we're going to do it, but I know how to motivate people that have a lot of talent.
Yeah. And people that are passionate about the cause. Because I'll go into this next question here, because I think this is really what we're talking about. In The Cove, you have this iconic quote where you basically say you're either an activist or an inactivist, essentially challenging them when it comes to some of these topics. You can't really be neutral. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're thinking that the underlying current is you're challenging the viewer. You're either an activist or an activist. And I had that same feeling when I was going. That film, if you haven't seen it, is for the viewers, it's about dolphin hunting in Japan. At the time, they were killing about 23,000 dolphins every year. 23,000 dolphins every year for human consumption. A lot of them were going to feed school children. They're force feeding, and all the dolphin meat that's been tested in Japan for the last 30 years has been found to be poisonous. Anywhere from 5 to 5,000 times more mercury than allowed by Japanese law if it was a fish. Yeah. But these are mammals, so they get through in this loophole. And in Japan, you have to eat everything on your plate as a school kid. You weren't allowed to bring in your own lunches, so they're being force-fed poison. So when we went to Japan, they were, this was going on, and I was just, I was just like, how is this happening? How is this even possible? Yeah. And we were going to just do I was doing racing Extinction first, and then I found this story, and I thought, okay, this is just going to be part of it. And then they went out, I wanted to go do the story legally. Yeah. And we met with the mayor and the city council. They said they don't want us there, but if we're going to be in town, stay away from this area. Yeah. And then I remember the moment where I went we snuck up to this park, Tsunami Park, and we could look down at this cove that people weren't allowed to go into when they were slaughtering dolphins. And I thought, oh, if we can figure out how to get in there with like some way to hide cameras, it could be interesting. And that's all. It was going to be a little part of a much bigger movie. And then I realized that when we started to get this footage back, I mean, you see the movie, it's like it's a thriller. We took what could have been a normal doc, we turned it into a thriller. I think Rolling Stone magazine said it's a cross between Flipper and The Bourne Identity. Oh my gosh. And it was. I mean, it was some of the scariest and most exciting times I've ever had in my life is sneaking into that cove, because it's dangerous. Everybody's carrying knives. They hate people trying to get in. And in Japan, if you get arrested, they can keep you for 28 days before they charge you. And in that interim, they always force a confession. Like 99% of the people that are even charged, before they're even charged with a crime, they confess because they put you in a cold room and you're naked, and they basically torture you to get a confession, so they can really. It's one way to keep the docks clean in the courtroom. Yeah.
Sure. I think with that being said too, people can also be scared sometimes to share their beliefs on a certain topic. We're talking about neutrality on things, right? And you've stood for so many things in the face of opposition. What is the cost of that conviction?
Well, I think it's important for me to think about what you're actually trying to do with a film. It's not. I'm not a filmmaker trying to keep my dance card filled making films. Yeah. I'm actually trying to change the world. Yeah. And I know that what that sounds like from the outside is like, oh, who's this guy think he is? But it's true. I mean, I think you have to have intention. I think you can change the world if you have intention. But you got to admit it to yourself of what you're trying to do. And in the film business, you have to be entertaining. Nobody's going to see a film in mass. Culture's not going to see a film in mass just because it's well-meaning. It has to be entertaining, otherwise people shut it off. So I come at it from, okay, how are we going to tell this story? And with The Code, we certainly fell into something that hit the zeitgeist. The Code became one of the most winning films in cinema history, but we didn't intend to make an entertaining film. We just thought, well, how can we get in there? We were filming it as we were doing it, and that footage became the film.
Yeah, it was phenomenal.
But the cost is, to answer your question, the cost is that you have to. There's death threats, So now I'm in fear not just for myself but for my family. I can't travel. I haven't been. I can't go back to Japan without fear of being arrested. There's still arrest warrants out for me there. You have to be willing to take the heat, from, this day and age from the outside, because there's always going to be very vocal people on the other side claiming that you're crazy.
Sure.
But that's just par for the course. There's the secret to, I think, changing culture, scaling social change is, they said 10% of the population, 100% committed to the truth is the recipe for social change.
Yeah.
And the best way any kid with a laptop can do that now. You don't have to be making movies or writing books or work for the New York Times as a writer. You can have a great idea and put it out there. And if it's a great idea and you get to that 10% number, you can change the world.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. Another movie you made, and I want to touch on this before we dive into maybe some of the more scary topics, was Mission Joy with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And I will say that was one that completely impacted me. Wondering if you could kind of give an overview of what that looked like and how that impacted you with the perspective of joy in challenging times.
Well, why did it affect you?
I think because watching these two talk, even though their lives have been so challenging, but even just how they spoke, they exuded joy. They're laughing, they're sharing stories about their friendship. And the way you just look at how they seem so genuinely happy, even though they've had so many challenges in their life, it makes you reflect on your own and say, gosh, I shouldn't be this worked up about this, or how can I find peace? So for me, it just made me reflect on myself.
Yeah. No, I wish I would have seen that movie that we made when I was your age or younger,
Sure.
because it really, something started, it was like a spinal alignment. It was like, of course, this is, that movie is about the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, two of the greatest spiritual leaders of our generation. Yeah. And our team had them in Dharamsala, the Dalai Lama's, hometown, for 4.5 days, talking about what it means to be human or find happiness in times of so much sorrow. And the way that happened, I was at a dinner at a friend's place, and it was a group dinner, and there's people at the table. We didn't have a chance to, for dessert, we switched down, and I was sitting next to this guy, Doug Abrams, who wrote a book called The Book of Joy with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu.
Right.
And he says, what do you do? And I said, well, I make films, documentaries. And which ones? I told him. He says, oh, that's great. I just did this book, The Book of Joy. And I said, I know that book. I read it. And he said, we filmed it. Do you think it could be made into a documentary? I said, well, let me see the footage. And they had 4.5 days of footage. And I was like, oh my God, this is so powerful.
Yeah.
And I just realized that when it's doing something to you, it's probably going to be doing something to the audience.
Yeah.
And that's how that came about. We put it together, and it just was so beautiful, just interviewing everybody and getting all these pieces together, talking about something so fundamental, like what gives you joy and happiness. If we foundationally as a society started with that, instead of, oh, you need to make money, you need to have a job, just have a job. It's like it comes down to, why are you here, and what's going to give you not pleasure but happiness and joy. And, I'll cut right to the chase. I mean, for everybody, and you can see the movie to learn all the details. But the only thing that gives you lasting joy when you think about it is when you're helping other people. Yeah. The stuff that doesn't, you get something from Amazon, you get a new car, whatever. It's temporary, that kind of that buzz, that whatever the dopamine or serotonin, whatever released. But the thing that gives you meaningful joy, lasting joy, is when you're helping other people, when you're in service to other people. Doctors feel that. I mean, you guys, probably doing this probably feels that there's elements to that. Yeah. Making films, everybody can have an aspect. It could just be your interaction that you have with the doorman or the maid or your anyone. But when you're helping other people, you're helping yourself. Mm-hmm. Dalai Lama says, well, there's wise selfish and foolish selfish. Foolish selfish is when you're manipulating other people for your own ends. Mm. You think of any number of businesses that probably do that. But but wise selfish is, it's by helping you, somebody else, it's also going to make you feel good. Yeah. So that's the wise selfish part of it.
Yeah. And I think that's why, even in watching the film, seeing their relationship was so beautiful, right? And you have two people that are so centered in themselves and finding joy in helping others and serving others, that I think like their connection naturally came together, and they're almost like children with their it's a boyish connection, right, that they have with each other. So I couldn't encourage everybody to see the film enough. It's incredible. Your films are always up against something with enormous power and financial interest in not changing. You have things like corporations, governments, and entire industries. After decades of doing this, what's your honest read on whether individual behavior change is enough, or does this actually have to be a systems fight?
It has to work on all three levels. I think I look at it, if you look at the Cove, they were killing, 23,000 animals every year. I remember the husband of one of our producers teaches philosophy in the CU system, the California University system, and he said, you think you're going to be able to change culture in Japan with a film? I said, I don't know, but I'm going to try. Yeah. First year it went down 60%. Now porpoise hunting is down 99.5%. Dolphin hunting is down over 93% because of the film and the activism around it. Yeah. Part of what happened, the film was really hard to get seen in Japan, but I made 3,444 DVDs back, because that's what you were doing back then. Yeah. Did them in, we had them made in with Japanese subtitles, and we sent them to, I hired a team over in Japan to handwrite addresses to everybody that lived in the town where they were primarily killing all those. Wow. And I sent them to everybody that lived in the town, thinking that just if one person saw it, and they realize that their kids are being force-fed this poison, right. That's all you need. It's like a positive virus that gets spread around. And hopefully, so there's three levels. There's constituents, get people to know that there's an issue. Then you want to get companies to change, and the highest level is policy. Policy, then everybody's kind of it's easier for them to do the right thing because the government says it is. And I remember, this is, I don't think of myself as a traditionally religious person, but I do think that there's mysterious forces at work. Yeah. And let me explain this a little bit. When we were making The Cove, the person I really wanted to meet the most was this guy, Akira Nakamai, the head of overseas fisheries for Japan. We were trying to get interviews with him, couldn't reach him. We were in the middle of making the film. And I was going down to IWC meeting. This is an International Whaling Commission meeting down in Chile. And my team, the plane was filled. I remember we were switching planes in Texas. And we were waiting for the plane's filled up. I can't even sit next to my own people for an 11-hour trip. They're holding the plane for one other person. And in comes Akira Nakamai. And there's one seat empty. It's right next to me. He sits down next to me.
You're kidding me.
Yeah. So here's the guy I most need to, the one person in the world I want to most meet. And he sits down right next to me. And I waited till, the plane took off and our dinner was being served so he couldn't switch with somebody else.
Smart.
And I said, do you have any idea who I am? And he goes, no. And I said, I know who you are. Pleasure to meet you. I want to show you a little film I've been working on. And I had a 9-minute, DVD that I put into my laptop. The film wasn't done yet. And I said, you're the guy that's in charge of, there's 23,000 dolphins and porpoises that are poisoned every year, being fed, a lot of it being fed to school children. How do you reconcile what you're doing with the health of your people? And he says, well, I'm in charge of food security, not food safety. In other words, he just wants to be sure that there's enough food on the plate, but it's somebody else's job to figure out if it's poison or not. And that's kind of how he got around that, intellectually. But I had him for 11 hours, and it was a fascinating ride down. But he never did grant me the interview, but they ended up changing. They were forced, I think, because of public perception, because we allowed the constituents to get the information, so that it had systemic change, but it came from the bottom down, not the top down. The bottom up, not the top down.
That's a signal, if you ever need one, that you're doing the right thing, right? The universe is serving you moments. That's great.
I think that's how it works. That's how I know I'm on the right path, is that like these crazy coincidences happen. A friend of mine calls it a God wink. When you start to meet the right people that just happen at the right time, it's just like, how is that possible? It doesn't make statistical sense.
No, I'm sure that story is just absolutely crazy. I'm sure you just pinched yourself when you saw him sit down next to you.
I feel the tension from the question, or from you showing him that film. I feel the tension right now of him watching that next to you on that plane.
Sure, he's like, you got to be kidding me.
How good was that dinner that was in front of him, right? Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story too. I did go back to Japan right after that, because Inarritu, he was a famous film director. He was the guest director at the Tokyo Film Festival, and they were doing the first Green Film Festival. And
wow.
And he said, I'm going to make it an international incident if you don't show the Cove. And so I came back with my lawyer. At the festival, they cleared. There wasn't a single person there at the film festival when I walked the green carpet. And I went into the theater and we showed the film. And at the back was the mayor of Taiji, this little town where they kill all the dolphins, the dolphin hunters. Akira Nakamai's deputy minister was there. The guy who was the head of the IWC previous, who was I think he was Yale educated, and he wrote a book on whaling. And we had secretly we were filming with a thermal camera in there, a night vision camera. Yeah. And when this famous scene comes on at the Cove, you can see him watching it. He's looking at the screen like this, and he goes, and he shakes his head, like he just, because he realized in that moment that their world had changed, like that all that rationale that you have for why you're doing it for, because of tradition or whatever, that all goes out when you see how those animals are being killed. Any intellectual argument you have just got destroyed. You can't bring that back. It can't. It's no longer about tradition. It's about how are you allowing this to happen? Yeah. And that's where showing is a lot better than telling. Yeah. When we saw what was going on at the Cove, we were like, holy hell, this isn't just a scene in another movie. This is the movie.
Yeah. That timing makes sense, too, that you were filming Racing Extinction when then the Cove came. Because actually when we were watching Racing Extinction, and I think you had gone to southern China and you were in these markets where they were selling illegal wildlife, I really said, how is anybody letting this guy near anything at this point? I would assume there's got to be a face. Like, this man's face is printed on the wall. Like, we got to keep him away from everything. But that makes sense now, of course.
Yeah, I think that's the last movie I think I appeared in, because I got a little bit too, exposed, I think, when you're doing that kind of work.
Yeah. I'd love to know how you select the films you're going to make. I'm sure if it was up to you, there's plenty of causes and change that you would love to bring to life through film. What makes you commit to one?
It's a good question. I'm thinking, what's the maximum good I can do with the time I've got left on the planet? You know, how is this story going to be told that's going to potentially change things? You know, I'm in the change the world business, and so I think, is it compelling? Is it important? Is it interesting? And can I find a way to tell the story that's unique and different?
Yeah.
You know, first of all, like it's got to be entertaining. You know, I just met with the guy that's like the real lord in my business. You know, the guy that greenlights everything for Netflix, and you know, I pitched 7 stories to him. You know, that we've been working on for a while.
Okay.
Some of them for 10 years, and they're all, I think, Netflix worthy.
Yeah.
But it's got to have a big audience, and it's not just to be popular. It's a money losing business, the documentary business. People think, oh, you're on Netflix, you're making tons of money. It's like barely covers the costs. But it's got to be really interesting to me, because it takes some of these films are 10 years. So like you can't do anything for the money for 10 years. I mean, that just becomes a job then.
It's true.
So I've got to feel motivated by the subject. So like, you know, the first thing I think of is like, is it going to, if I'm going to wake up 10 years from now, do I think I'll still be excited by this? And if the answer is yes, that's the first level.
Sure.
Because it's like you have to sustain yourself for a long time to get the enthusiasm up. You know, you're a different person in 10 years. You know, like the stuff what interested you back then might not be as compelling, but everything that we're doing, when I look back at the roster of films that we've done, I feel excited by them still. It's like I don't get bored watching them, you know. So when you're making them, you know, that like the 100th time you've seen a film, when you're doing the editing process and you're doing these micro adjustments, and it feels like you can't even tell if the film's any different when you're just making these little adjustments. Yeah. But when I look at them now, it feels like they're new eyes. And I think, oh, that's amazing. We did that?
That's me? Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's me. I think there's a whole bunch of people that are amazing people. The editors, the composers, the writers, everything. It's like it's a team sport. You know, making a film, and that's what's beautiful to me. And you have to, the funding is like another level. So many hurdles. You know, it's the idea. Then there's like, you have the idea, then you have to get the financing, then the financing, then you have to get this distribution, then you get distribution, then you have to get people to see it. It's like these, there's a lot of hurdles to get over to get to culture change. Yeah.
Your Ocean's 11 team, exactly. It's probably a good transition here. I'd love to talk about the Plastic Detox. As I said, we watched it this week. It's on Netflix now. Everyone needs to watch it. Can you share with me what gave you the inclination that this movie needed to be made, and then maybe just a kind of overview of what the movie was about?
Yeah, like I said, I run a little organization called the Oceanic Preservation Society, and the last 2 times I went to Europe, I didn't get in the water. I was on a boat off of Positano, one of the most beautiful coastlines on the planet. It's gorgeous there. And I was about to dive in. I remember looking down at it was pretty clear, but it was like 3 dimensions of garbage going through the water, most of it plastic, big pieces of plastic, not microplastics. And, went back in the afternoon, it was still garbage flowing by. And the next day it was the same thing. And I was like, man, that's just disgusting. Yeah. Then we sailed up to the south of France, and it was the same thing. And about that same time, a guy came to visit and said, I want to do a story on plastics. And he had $250,000, which it's like a fraction of what you need to make a movie. I said, well, maybe we could do a short. He wanted to do a story about the positive aspects of plastic, like the solutions for plastic. Okay. And I said, well, maybe we could do a short. Then Andrew Forrest came up. He's one of the wealthiest guys in Australia, and he wanted to do a film. I said, well, there's another guy putting some money in for this. Let's do that, Yeah. And then the pandemic hit, and originally it was going to be an environmental film, and then we looked at the environmental films that were out there on the same subject, and you want to slit your wrists after 5 minutes. It's like you kind of know what's going on, and things haven't changed.
Yeah,
those films are okay, but they're like it wasn't motivating anybody to do anything. And then the pandemic hit. We could get all these researchers and these top scientists that I talked about in the world. You could get them on Zoom, and the more we researched it, we realized the sea is toxic with plastic, but it's also inside of us. And then I started thinking, that could be a story that I haven't heard or seen told in a very compelling way. And then if you're going to tell that story about the toxic sea inside of us, who's your protagonist? Who's going to carry that whole film? And plastics is you've seen the film. It's an endocrine disruptor. It affects all of your hormones. So it means pretty much everything in your body is affected by it, from intelligence to immunity. It causes cancers, fertility, all of that. Right. And like how, I don't want to do a big survey of, because people don't, it's just information at that point. Yep. How do you tell a story that's going to be compelling? And we found this researcher, Shauna Swan, who was, at the time, 88 years old, 5 foot nothing. And she was talking about her fertility going down at this dramatic rate, 1% a year for the last 50 years. It's accelerating to 2.66%. It's a huge problem. And I thought plastics affects everything in your body, all your hormone system, but fertility is the one thing that unites us all, because we all have mothers and fathers.
Yep.
And it's affecting your epigenetics. It's affecting, so your, plastics in your body, it's not just affecting you, it's affecting your progeny, affecting your children 3, 4, 5 generations out. So this seemed like a compelling story to me. Like this is huge. She's saying that by 2045, most couples will need to use IVF to get pregnant because of the declining sperm quality. We don't know exactly what's going on in the women, probably something very similar, but it's unethical to test the egg quality in a woman, so the man's easier to test. Yeah. So then we had to come up with an idea, like, well, we're going to show this, we're going to be a compelling film. How do we show it?
Yeah.
So we came up with this idea of doing a fertility study and doing a plastic intervention looped in with this fertility study. So we found 6 couples who had unexplained infertility, and we did a 90-day intervention because it takes men 70 days to generate new sperm. And on the first day, the men send in a sperm sample. We take a urine sample of the man and the woman to find out if there's plastics in their blood. There's 2 plasticizing chemicals. There's basically the 2 big buckets are phthalates and BPA, or bisphenols. And we measure those levels in day and nighttime. And then we do a midpoint test and an endpoint test. And, it's an expensive study. It's a lot of time. And we didn't know if it would be a payout. We didn't know if we could really reduce the level of their exposure by doing an intervention. She goes into their homes, and she goes through the bathrooms, the kitchen, every room of the house, looking at personal care products. We do a swap out with clean products, and hopefully they're diligent. And then we do measurements, and it was I couldn't have dreamt of a better outcome. When you look at, was there a payout? Because we thought, well, what if we do this and nothing happens? Do we just spend a lot of money on time on something that didn't work? But it worked.
Can you speak to that payout and the results? Not to give spoilers, but I think it's just so telling of the work you all did. It was a surprise. I was telling, or Luke was with me, I was crying at the end of this movie just from the shock of the impact that this had, and that this truly was so emotional just to see it all come to light.
Yeah, it's still emotional to me. Like I was telling you, it's like I see this, at the end of the film, it's just, it's so beautiful because it gets at something that's fundamental to all of our survival, is having kids. And this is your podcast is going to come out after the film is out. I think I'm allowed to say that the couples in the film had agency. They were motivated. They got plastic out of their life. Most of them got down to levels that were almost undetectable. 5 of the men were infertile or subfertile and didn't know it. Because, a man, they have an ejaculation and say, oh, I've got sperm. It must be the female's problem.
Right.
Yep.
Well, it was the men. At least half of it was the problem was the men. With this one intervention that they did by keeping these products out of their life, they got their levels down to nearly undetectable. Their sperm rate shots up, and you have, at the end of it. Well, let's just say it's been an incredibly great ending. Like I couldn't expect anything better from like the first pregnancy. I was crying, and then was a second one and a third one. It was like, holy! Can I swear? Holy
Yes,
fuck!
you can.
It's like I can't believe this is happening. It was so beautiful that, and then you see the joy of the couples, and you realize that it worked.
It worked.
And then. These are 6 couples. You get to know them pretty well over the course of this intervention, really well.
Yeah.
And then you realize that for every one of them out there, and it gets on Netflix, and there's 1 billion people now that see Netflix.
Yeah.
There's 350 million subscribers, about 4 people past, see each one. It's like this film has the potential to do an enormous amount of good to couples that aren't talking about this. It's, because fertility and sperm quality is not something that guys are usually openly talking about. It's taboo.
Yeah.
And Shauna Swan, the protagonist of this movie, who's now 89 years old, she's this unassuming, wonderful, researcher working on this issue for 25 years, and writing books and speaking to what we talked about earlier, she's been writing papers for 25 years and couldn't get any traction. And then she says, I've got to step out of my ivory tower and speak to the people. So she goes on Joe Rogan, she goes on these other podcasts, she's and Comedy Central, and she's getting out there. And now she's on this Netflix, hopefully a hit, and she's getting the word out there. We're getting the word out there.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. I want to talk about this idea of chemicals in this country. So there's only 9 chemicals that are banned here in the U.S. from personal care products. You highlighted that in the film. Well, there are over 1,100 that are banned in the EU. How are we supposed to make sense of that gap? And what would you actually want people to do with that information?
It's a difficult one because we're talking about policy. And I mean, just before I got here, literally the last person I talked to before you guys was, working at the White House on this issue. And it's very difficult for them to work on this issue because fossil fuels plastics comes from fossil fuels.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can't get around that. I mean, you can get around it, but in this country right now. So what you're talking about is like when the financial interests of big, powerful companies that are supporting the political system in this country are at odds with the health of humanity.
Right.
Yep.
That's that intersection. So you have a choice between money or health, very clearly.
Yep.
And I'm not against plastics as a way to make things lighter and cheaper and all that, but we can avoid the way that it gets into our bodies. That's affecting your endocrine system, and that's you inhale it, you ingest it, and you absorb it.
Yeah.
So there's products out there right now. There are nascent stages that are being developed so you can keep these chemicals out of your body. And that's all. I'm just fighting for that. Plastics, are everywhere.
Yeah.
You're not going to get around. Well, maybe you'll get around it eventually, but right now, that's all I'm fighting for.
Yeah.
Just keep it out of our bodies. How can we do that? Let's first principles. And I understand that it's very difficult with this administration. But they're inviting us to come to the White House to talk. They can't support the film,
Great.
but they want to hear what we have to say. So see if there's common ground.
Yeah.
I've got great hopes that things can be done with this administration.
Yeah.
We don't see eye to eye on everything, but I don't want to see eye to eye. I don't need to see eye. I just want to
Right.
see eye to eye on this issue.
This one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's the holy grail for sure, is to get policy, because what they're doing in the EU is it's a precautionary principle.
Yeah.
If it's not tested, don't let it into the system. It's the opposite of what we do here. We test it. We find out there's a problem. Every aluminum can that's out there in the drink bin is lined with a BPA.
Yeah.
It's a bisphenol.
Yep.
And BPA was experimented as a birth control for men in the 1930s.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's
Crazy.
crazy.
And
It's
a
crazy.
few years later, they found another chemical compound that was better, so they banned BPA. Then a few years later, they tried it, and it is used to harden plastic, and it's still lining all the aluminum cans and the cans of beans that you have in the supermarket. I mean, you can see a spike of thousands of times more between, let's say, students served clam chowder that's made from scratch and clam chowder from a can. Mm-hmm. I mean, just from single servings.
Yep.
So it's coming into our bodies in these ways. You think, oh, well, this can of beans from the grocery store, how could it be lethal? Could it? Well, it may not be lethal, but it could be, affecting your endocrine system. And unlike other toxins where the dose is the poison, with your endocrine system, most you need is a few molecules to change it. So, and obviously the more you have of it, when you're bombarding it with these chemicals, you want to keep them out of your life.
Yeah. We obviously we're immensely passionate about this space, and I think we've had some funny conversations with some people who, when we start to talk about whatever our new thing that we're pushing is, right, if we're saying, oh, we want to cut plastics, or hey, we need to have cleaner water, these different things, we get the response sometimes of, we're all going to die someday. I just don't want to over-index on this.
I've done that a lot.
Yeah, which, I mean, I will say, like, we look at our bathroom counter right now, and I see a ton of plastics. And after I watched the movie, I went in to get ready for bed, and I see my counter. I'm like, oh my gosh, right? I mean, it's crazy. I will say from, and if I misquote this, correct me, from, I believe it was Racing Extinction, it was better to light one candle than curse the darkness, right? I love that in the context of this. I'm curious if you feel the same way, but in saying we can still make smaller changes, even if it's not saying, okay, I have to cut every single plastic out of my life. It doesn't seem feasible right now, but I'm curious, have you had those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I've gone down hundreds of rabbit holes trying to figure out which products to do, and I'll just plug for a minute if what we're trying to do, because when I did this film, it's like, okay, everything, like the same thing. You go to everything you're doing is wrong. In fact, I went out with this a friend of mine. Went out on a date, and I told her, she said, what are you working on? I told her I'm doing a film on plastics. She said, are you doing anything about textiles? I go, no, why? She said, well, everything you have on is toxic. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that, there's, the polyester clothes, or the, not that but all the dyes are petrochemicals.
Yep.
So it's everywhere. What was the question?
Basically just how do you make this digestible for the everyday people
so
wanting to do this?
You go down this rabbit hole of, let's say, finding a toothbrush that's not made out of plastic, and the bristles and the handle and all that. And you come, you might get a bamboo toothbrush with soybean oil based bristles.
Sure.
And the bristles start to fall out, or it doesn't last. And I want people to find a place where they can get these materials. I actually called the head of sustainability for Amazon, and I thought, I had this brilliant idea. Why don't you have a plastic free button, on there? And I realized
great.
It vilifies everything else in their supply chain.
Yep.
Because that's the hardest thing. It's like you want to find a toothpaste because for people that don't know, phthalates are in just about everything that has a scent. It stabilizes the scent. So if you have that nice smell of your cleaning, your shampoo or your perfume or your underarm deodorant, anything that has a scent most likely has phthalates in it. So wash machine, stuff, everything. so you want to find out what's clean, what's good, and it takes hours to find the right thing, and you don't want people to be discouraged. I don't want people to be discouraged because it is doable. You can do this. There are products out there. So we found them. We found like 800 products, and we partnered with this place called Grove Collaborative, and we curated a finely tuned list of basically a high-low. You want the best toothbrush in the world for electronic. It's like the Lamborghini of electric toothbrushes. That's clean and non-toxic. We got that. If you want the $7 option, if you can't afford it, we have that covered too. So we went through 800 different products, so you can find them.
Yep.
So Unplastic Your Life Shop.
Love it.
.com. And we'll refine it as we go along. But that was the idea. Is like, how do I become the Jeff Bezos with a conscience?
That's great.
Yeah, because it's like, how much more money do you need, Jeff? It's like, and he can't do the right thing because it's out of line with his business model. He doesn't care about your health. We do. We're a nonprofit organization. Our books balance out to zero. I want to make the world a better place. Now, he might think he's doing it by giving you stuff cheap, the next day.
Fast,
but we have a different business model.
Yeah. The Grove Collaborative Shop is fantastic. We were talking about this, and such a plug for Grove, so great.
Yeah, we'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah. But it is. You go onto the site, and it says, which room do you want to deplastic, right? I'm like, oh, click kitchen, click bedroom, whatever it might be. I think it's great. And I totally agree with your sentiment, too, around it's kind of trial and error. Some things aren't maybe going to work for you, and you got to kind of find one that works. Luke's mother has been a huge proponent of this since you were a kid, right? Like, she's always been pushing this, which love her for that. Not to embarrass you, but I think we've been doing a trial and error with deodorant.
Yeah.
Like, you were trying these like very healthy non-plastic deodorants, like great ingredients. I'm like, you smell. We can't do this. Like, it's not working.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
But I think we got a good one now.
Totally.
But we're trial and erroring different things, right?
Totally.
So we had like, for every product that we have on there, we didn't just use Grove's list. We curated our own. We went out there and found a dozen. So we're out there, and everybody has a different pH, so it'll react different. You go to do a workout, and you want to, and you do it. What works for you might not work for you or me.
Yeah.
So we found we tried dozens and dozens of different deodorants to find, and then some of them are like, they really work, but it's a little bit ick.
Yeah.
You have to there's like it's a glass jar with a tin top, but you have to like put it on with your finger, and then you have to wipe off your finger, and it's like, people don't like to usually put their hands in their pits when they're the last thing they're doing when they clean up.
No kidding.
There's all I remember I thought I'm going to go on to a very respected website to find out what's the cleanest product. And I did, and I ordered like I do because I don't want to order again. I ordered like 3 of these sticks, and it comes in. It's like it's in plastic. Yep. It's a plastic container, and it's like, well, I call up this group that did it. I said, well, what's the deal with this? It's like it's rated number 1, but it's in plastic. So we're only interested in the chemical inside of it. We're not worried if it's leaching into the plastic. Or from plastic to your body, and it's like, well, how do I have a higher standard than these group of scientists that have a different level of me? I don't want to throw that stick away. I'd rather they make them in cardboard. There's other methods to do it. So our level is like, how do you have it non-toxic and plastic free? And it's tough to do that. It's really tough, but I think we came as close as anybody's ever done to it.
That's great.
Yeah. So if the plastic detox does exactly what you hope it does, what does the world look like in 5 years that it wouldn't have without it?
I'd like to see what we're talking about be commonplace.
Yeah.
You go to a Costco and you don't see a sea of plastic. You see that there's aisles for, it's almost like organic food that 30 years ago there wasn't organic sections. I had one of the first, I was talking about this earlier, I had one of the first electric cars in Colorado. There's 3 electric cars that I knew of in Colorado. And I was a maniac. You know, like I had it was powered by 114 solar panels. My car said VUS. It stood for vehicle using sun. It was the opposite of an SUV.
It's great.
And in racing Extinction, I'll tell you the story because I think it's really interesting. You know, we took a Model S and we turned it into a Bond car for the environment. We had a forward-looking infrared camera that came out of the frunk, so you could see the invisible world of greenhouse gases. We had a IMAX projector that came out of the back on this robotic arm, so we could project those images onto buildings or onto mountaintops. You know, it was incredible. It was the first car in the world with electroluminescent paint job. In 2012, the Model S had more or less had just come out, and we were going to interview Elon Musk for that.
Yeah.
And I remember it was October, and he called me and said, "Can we put off the interview until the next quarter?" And I said, "Sure, but why?" He said, "Well, I could go bankrupt." That's 2012. That's, I know, 14 years ago. So he went from almost going bankrupt to being the richest guy in the world. These changes happen very quickly in 10 years. So now, like, I always thought, like, one day electric cars will be common. And now, like, I'm in California, and that's the Toyota. They call them Tesla's, the California Camry.
Totally.
You know, it's like sometimes I'll be at a light. I remember it used to be when I had this Model S that I was talking about, the crazy car. You'd see another Tesla, and it's like, oh, I used to see the lights, and I thought that's another Tesla. Wow, that's cool. We waved to each other.
Totally.
Now it's like so common.
Yeah.
You know, so these increments of 10 years are about what it takes to take scientific revolutions. And there's a friend of mine, Tony Seba. He's a futurist, really a motivational guy. I remember when I had this electric car and I felt like a crazy one. He showed a slide at one of his talks. It was a 1900 Easter parade in New York, looking down at the streets of New York, and it was like all horses except for one car. Then 13 years later, it was just reversed. It was all cars, one horse. And now horses, you know, back then you think, oh, horse, that was a better time. Well, it wasn't. 300,000 horses in New York, all dropping crap in the road.
Right.
I had a great grandmother on my mother's side that was born in New York in 1880. She lived to 104, and she said it stunk. You could smell New York from 6 miles away. You know, because 20,000 gallons of urine being dumped out on the streets from horses. Crap on your shoes into the schools, into the workplaces. The place stunk. Yeah. You know, so cars were an upgrade, believe it or not.
Yeah.
In 2007, we were hitting the number 2 key 6 times on our flip phone to text a capital C. Yeah. These changes happen really quickly. You know, it's all going back to the point of like, it sounds crazy, but like, how do you get plastic out of your life? Well, it can happen really quickly. Once you have these scientific revolutions, when people start to understand that there's a demand for it, there's alternative. You don't need to have it out of petrochemical for some of these chemicals that are getting into your body through absorbing, inhaling, or ingesting. Yeah. There's solutions out there. Once the solutions are out there, I'd love to see the world change like that. You know, it's possible. It's crazy. It sounds insane, but it's going to happen. It should happen. It starts with, films, books, people talking to each other. Yeah. So the crazy journey that you're on, we were talking about like filtered water, that's so these things become normalized.
Totally.
And it's possible. You live as long as I have, and you can see these, you can see how change happens. In Taiji, they probably thought in Japan where they were killing the dolphins, they thought, well, we're going to be doing this forever. Well, forever was about 15 years,
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. Here in Austin, we have the electric vehicle take over as well, which is quite great. Even the cyber trucks now are also everywhere. And some people, they come to Austin, like, oh my gosh, like, they're all over. There's 6 in the Whole Foods parking lot. Like, that's what you're going to do. To close out, normally we would do some rapid fires. I would like to call these our not so rapid fires. Feel free to answer these for as long as you would like. Yeah. Luke and I both have a hypothesis on how you might answer this one, but I would love to know, what is the most nervous you've been filming a movie?
I think undercover in China when we were posing as shark oil dealers.
Yes.
That was probably the scariest because we didn't have any kind of a support system. We were pretty far away from any kind of embassy. We were dealing with basically a mob, the mob, and then in Japan too. I think when we were doing that, we were so deep into this that we were, I was worried that something would happen to my crew, that, they could get arrested, they could get hurt. And then it's like, is it really worth it? When you're talking about people getting harmed,
Yeah.
But then when you look at the consequences, that the good that can come out of it, it should be worth it, right?
Yeah.
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 But I'd say those two things, China and Japan.
Yeah. And China was embracing extinction, right?
Right.
Yeah. My guess was Taiji, Japan, and you all doing your undercover work there. Do you want to share what you think?
I actually took a different route, which we actually spoke about earlier off camera, but I took a different route thinking about this film with a Plastic Detox of you were spending years of your life with this and you didn't know what the outcome was going to be. You had a hypothesis around it, right? But, I think some of your other films had similar, but, Game Changers, you had more test results that were happening in a quicker time span. This one was literally multiple people got pregnant. 3 of the couples got pregnant, and 2 gave birth last month, which was crazy,
Crazy, yeah.
Really crazy. So that was the route that I took that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I guess there's like 2 different kinds of risks, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
It's like the physical risk and then the sort of the professional risk.
Totally,
Right.
totally.
And that's, I hate taking investors' money.
Yeah,
and we've never done it in terms of wasting money. I tell all of our investors, I know we're getting away from rapid fire.
no, it's
Good
great.
point.
It's
Our
great.
not so rapid
This is
fire.
our not so rapid fire.
I tell the investors that want to invest in our film, thinking that they're going to ROI, and there's going to be money at the end of the rainbow. I said, your odds of getting a return are better in Vegas. But if you want to change the world, you've come to the right place. In that, I'd probably get rid of 90% of the investors that would want to support us otherwise, but, because they think I'll invest if it's going to get their money back plus something. But, but we haven't failed yet, I don't think, in a film. They've always had amazing outcomes. But, I think it's like having the recipe for a winning team. If you have somebody that knows how to win.
Yeah.
And that's, but by winning, you have to fail a lot, right?
Yeah.
I think it was Ted Turner who said, like, after he had fired one of his winning coaches, he said, like, I wasn't losing, I was just learning how to fail.
Yeah. That's great. It's so interesting too, because just to echo what you're saying around this specific movie, like for us, obviously, we're building, and our audience knows, right? We're building our company in the fertility space, and it is just it requires such high trust. So for you to make this film too about this, one of the most important moments in many people's lives, and just the care that went into that, it was so clear watching Shauna meet with these couples, just how much went into the preparation for this, how you were interacting with these couples. And I'm sure even now, with you probably getting the phone call that they're having babies, like just how much goes into that. It's high pressure in a lot of ways too. Sure.
Yeah, and again, it's not just me. It's it's great producers.
Yeah.
A great team. It's all kind of working in concert together to this one outcome.
Yeah.
And now it's it's in Netflix's hands pretty much.
We can trust them. Yeah.
Good hands. Good hands.
All right. Final question here. What is your one piece of advice you would want to give to the world?
I'd say everybody thinks that they're just one person. There's that famous Margaret Mead quote. She says, "Never doubt that a few thoughtful citizens can change the world." And, indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. It's that everybody has an opportunity to change the world. Starting with the next interaction you have with somebody. We're very powerful, not in like I'm more powerful than you kind of thing, but more like we have an incredible, we all have, every chance you have to think a little bit differently, how you interact with somebody, how you go about your day, you have a chance to change the world. You change yourself, you change the world. And the first thing is to realize that you do have that ability to do it. Everybody does. It doesn't matter who you are. It's just you have enormous amount of potential, every single one of us. And I think people, and then once you've made that choice, I think there's unseen forces that conspire to help you. The same forces that help Akira Nakamai sit next to me. I think you're being guided probably by unseen forces. I know this sounds really wonky. I've just drifted into the Northern California woo-woo world, but it's true. I mean, it's really true. I mean, I can't explain it any other way. That how do these miracles happen unless there's something besides you making them happen?
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I think that's a perfect way to close it out. Louie, thank you so much for coming on. I know that our listeners are going to be blown away by all the films that you've made and all of your advice. And everybody's got to go and watch The Plastic Detox. It's going to change the way that you see the world and how you interact with it.
I hope so.
As well as all your other films. So thank you again for being here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.